everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Good morning, Mr. Satish Jha and Mr. David Willox, and good evening to all those who are joining us from India. It's indeed a great pleasure and privilege to have two ace social entrepreneurs and social impact investors, and also very articulate speakers to be with us today evening to talk about scale and scalability of social enterprises. Our head of the institution was supposed to join. She's traveling, but she sent her best wishes to all of us, and she said that go ahead with it. But I just wanted to mention one point is that to the participant that we need to appreciate Professor Vibha Chauhan, who is the head of the institution, that she visualized to set up this Center for Social Innovation and Social Enterprise in Delhi University. So we are among the first Delhi University colleges, out of 70 colleges in the whole Delhi University, to have a center focused exclusively on social innovation and social enterprises. And since last year, we have been holding regular workshops, seminars, webinars, and also online courses, which have actually run during the pandemic time also. And we also published some very interesting research finding, which was part of the UK-India Education Research Initiative. So if anybody is interested, we can share the link of the website of the center, and you will find some resources which could be helpful to understand the larger scenario of social enterprises in India. The topic that I chose today was scaling social enterprises, but I thought of adding, two important suffix questions to it, which are actually very fundamental. That is, how and when and where to take off. This is a concern which many social entrepreneurs and social enterprises face. But there's another question which came to my mind, which I believe is equally important. That is, how to land safely. And this is going to be the gamut of the conversation which we're going to have today evening. Not only just to launch, but if there is a problem, how do we sort of land safely is another aspect which I would want David and Satish to focus on. It means, as we all know, that social innovation and social enterprise is actually not a new phenomenon, but its importance has certainly sort of accelerated in the last decade, if I can say so. But particularly in the last 6 months during the pandemic, we are hearing the voices towards this shared value creation. We're talking about hybrid organizations. We're talking about blending and cogging these concerns of profitability and the 3 Ps of planet and people also to be brought in as a core concern of the business. And it's also said that thinking big and thinking fast can help social entrepreneurs better address some of the global impact challenges, face less competition, have access to growth capital more easily, and also to seek fast failures for quick learning and relearning, which David also talked about in one of his posts. Scaling also needs that, I believe, a very robust model with strong product market fits, solid traction, and a clear sense of how unit economy will evolve in different growth scenarios. But certainly, I would believe that we cannot reduce failure to 0 level, but we can reduce the probability of the failure if we are very clear with the focus of the core brand, and we are aware of the unique business model we want to pursue. We bring in passion, we bring in commitment, we bring in perseverance, and also master the business requirements and develop this bigger sense of larger ecosystem and the institutional architecture or the institutional void within which you want to operate in. However, we need to keep in mind that scaling certainly is not for everybody. And it is often said that fewer than 1% or 1 out of 100 of these social enterprises actually scale. And out of them too, also about 10% are able to scale successfully. So why is scaling so hard and tricky, or a treacherous terrain, if you can use this word? Is it because what got you this far is not good enough to take you any further? So these are the questions around which our conversation and dialogue is going to revolve around. Another thing that comes to my mind is how exactly you identify and explore and provide an understanding to what are the key factors and main challenges of scaling up a social enterprise. So we're looking into the deliberations and dialogues which Mr. Satish Jha and Mr. David Wilcox will enter into subsequently. And because I also believe that they are not only social investors, but also have actually walked the walk and have this enormous empathy and experience in this field, which we can tap upon. So I stop here, but before I stop, I have to do this formality of introducing. I think everybody, many of us know Satish and David, but just to, for all those who are joining new and my students, particularly from Delhi University, I would like to give brief sort of introduction to our two panelists. So our first panelist is Mr. Satish Jha, who himself is a social entrepreneur, as I said, and he's an early stage investor in socially relevant technology based startups, and is also a chief advisor in the Boston Center for Excellence in Healthcare. He's an editor, or rather he was an editor of one of the most reputed weekly news magazine of India, that is Dinaman, which was a part of Times of India group. And as a social entrepreneur particularly, I would like to mention that he nurtured Tarahat.com, Drishti, eHealthcare, and 40+ startups, from angel investing, forming boards, mentoring founders, and raising the next round of funds, and finding clients and making business viable. He began his social work with Jayaprakash Narayan. Any Indian would know and recognize the remarkable work JP movement was in the 1960s. And also, he was soon asked by R.M. Goenka, who was an owner of Indian Express Group, to start a national daily, Hindi daily newspaper that was launched as Sept, again, a very popular newspaper in India. And another thing which I would like to mention about Mr. Jha was that he started one laptop per child in India that led to the adoption of screen-based learning in government schools across several states in India. And we are seeing the importance of it when large part of teaching is actually gone in the digital. So thank you, and Mr. Jha, for sparing the time and being with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so our second speaker quickly, that is Mr. David Wilcox, who is again a social change leader and a founder of Reach Scale, a purpose-built global network that is scaling innovation or innovative social enterprises, as well as building networks and ecosystems to shift the significant resources into sustainable models for solving the world's most challenging problems. Reach Scale Global's activities are driven by very clear understanding of the knowledge around scale, and it resides in the innovative social enterprise and high efficiency NGOs. Reach Scale advocacy highlights the importance of the critical knowledge to the real progress in solving the world's toughest problems. And Reach Scale works in scaling social enterprises in India, Africa, and globally to demonstrate and scale success and move resources to sustainable models. So with the dual interest of business and social progress, Mr. Wilcox has been CEO, CMO, and head of business development for a number of technology startups, consulting firms, think tanks, and digital enterprises. So I just wanted to share one slide before I, if I can do that, about what I thought was sort of sums up. If you can see the slide, is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I thought, yeah, I'll just push a chair. So I thought to just bullet point the drivers or the propellers for the social enterprises, and also sort of list out the key challenges or constraints. So this slide sort of, in my understanding of social enterprises, is summing up and in the nutshell what Satish and David are going to elaborate upon. These are just bullet points. I'm sure they will add on a lot of meat to the conversation and a lot of real experiences and narratives to the story. But, I am not going into the details of it, but just for the audience and for the students to sort of grasp what are the drivers and what are the voids which usually scaling up brings in terms of social enterprises. And the second slide, which I thought is important in terms of understanding, and this is an acronym which I thought is interesting because the acronym CORRECT, correct, stands for all the elements that the social enterprises should have if they think about scaling. That is, they need to exhibit credibility, their product, their services have to be observable to ensure that the potential users can see the results in practice. They have to be relevant in addressing some of the persistent or stubborn problems of the society. They have to show or exhibit relative advantages over the existing practices, and they have to be easy to install and to be understood rather than being very complex and complicated. And then they have to be testable so that the potential users can see the intervention on all scales. So with this slide, I stop here and invite Mr. Satish Jha to carry on the conversation. Over to you, Satish.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. I think most of our listeners are in India, so I shall say good afternoon to you all. And it's a privilege to be here because not often we get to talk about any subject with people who are serious about it. I would say to the first question that Dr. Roy has raised, is it tricky? I think being successful is always tricky in any space. We all speak, we all sing, we all do, but some do in a way that we remember them. How many great singers we know? There are plenty of them, but they are not as many of us. So similarly, in case of success of social enterprises, you're looking at 1 in a million that really scale up. I would look at my favorite, most scaled project of all time that I remember is Charkha. Charkha, the spinning wheel of Mahatma Gandhi. And this is, this is the 150th year, I think, of Gandhiji's birth actually. So I would say that it's good to recall him. He created such. But the important part was it reached every village, every villager, no matter how poor. They all had charkha until about the 70s. It became part of the Khadi movement. It was not aided by the state. It was not helped by the market. It was a movement which was required at that point in time. And I think it's achieved something which is extraordinary. We can look at many other examples of Seva of Ilaben, but we can look at, I don't know if Amul is as good an example because it had a lot of state support. I look at social entrepreneurs. Hello? I look at social entrepreneurs as those who walk the space which has not been populated by the market and the state. If markets can do it, if state can take care of it, well, there will not be much space for people to try to address the issues. They will think of something different. So the cause, what brings people together to solve a social problem arises because markets are not able to understand or address that, nor is state able to do that. Is it tricky? It is indeed very tricky from one point of view that success requires everything and more. And the more part is something not everyone understands. Let's look at it this way. Knowledge-wise, professor knows, professor has the knowledge, but entrepreneur doesn't have to know everything to be able to succeed in business and create wealth. Some of our leaders in wealth creation were not those who went to colleges and schools, including in this generation, the names we can take, they are not the ones who were known for scholarship. They were known for entrepreneurship, which is different from scholarship. It's a time for action as an entrepreneur. So when you look at social enterprise, what are we looking at? Someone who has interest in a cause which will make the life of people, those who can't make their life easier, a little easier. Now you have to create value around that. How do you do that? Well, say for instance, a social entrepreneur figures out a way to solve a small problem. The first thing is, okay, you've solved the problem. Is it viable? That means, can it be done in such a way that it becomes self-sustaining? From viability to self-sustainability, now you go to something, can we now replicate it? In other words, if I've done it once, can I do it twice? And if all these conditions are met, then the question of scalability comes in. So first test is, have we found a solution that actually works? And to test that out, now there are billions of people trying to find solutions. Some are serious about it, but no matter which space you look at, a few thousand solutions are not very difficult to imagine. And some of them will survive. Now it's a case of whether you are market-led or you're social entrepreneurship-led. Many solutions come up, some survive because they are simpler. They address a larger number of people. They imagine the world at a scale in the sense they solve it for everyone. And they try to make it cheaper as well. Cheaper to offer a solution, cheaper to maintain and operate, and simpler as well. So simplicity, cost effectiveness, all these are aspects of any solution, including in the social space that you'd think in terms of. So Charkha was a very simple solution. Just imagine how simple it was. And it, in some way, shook the foundations of British mercantile capitalism at that point in time. It challenged Manchester. It made people wear khadi. Of course, it was a political movement combined with a social entrepreneurship as such. But think of it this way. Since then, many examples all over the world have come up, but they are limited by the leadership of those who found them. Gandhi was a great leader. So what he started went far, far beyond our imagination. Mother Teresa, for instance, what she started in terms of reputation, in terms of resources, it became large, but it didn't become universal as Charkha was. Charkha actually went to every single village of India. It went to every home, rich or poor, didn't matter. And that kind of experiment is associated with the great leaders. So in other words, I would say that success of a social enterprise also reflects the leadership it comes with. Those who can imagine a generation or two beyond, they will have a much larger, better, cheaper, more effective solution which can scale up. Some of the experiments we tried, for instance, one of them was SKS Microfinance. As a digital partners, which basically was about the same time as we founded Baramati Conference. Baramati is a village in Pune. It is also a birthplace of Sharad Pawar. And for some reason, he reached out to me and I went, it's hardly a village. It's almost like as good as a decent town, but it's actually a village. And we began the journey from there called Baramati Conference, which brought quite a few innovative social experiments together. And that's the time Digital Partners was founded. I'll share one thing with you. Just the $50,000 invested in SKS Microfinance, and SKS went to about $3.5 billion of worth of disbursement to women whose annual income was less than $1,000. Now that happened. And then this came about not just by being a social business. It came about by Vikramakula thinking in terms of how to scale. And he took it to make it the single largest at one point in time, but some things were not really stable enough, so it came crashing down. But it was picked up by Sahaj, which became the largest social, you can say, in some ways, in terms of microfinancing institution as such. But all of them are just microcosm in larger context of what India needs. But why has it not become as ubiquitous as a bank, for instance? We have to ask those questions. I think the issue is leadership. The vision to take it to the level where every deserving or every person needy of the support of a microfinance could take it requires a Gandhi of a leader. That is not that common. That's not easy to have. We haven't had a leader like Gandhi in the world in quite some time. when I ask people about the leadership that actually changed the 20th century, the three names that come all the time, Gandhi, Mandela, and King, and you can't have them all the time. So how do you do that? Is it possible? I think it's possible. The possibility requires us to think through the issues. First thing, think of it this way. In some ways, every business is social. It meets a social need. Be it Apple, what can we do without it in terms of, say, cell phone, or Samsung, or anyone? But think of it this way. Motorola created the phone and the technology. Who reaped it? So those who create may be one, those who reap may be someone different. Don't forget today that Apple computers today has market capital today, which is more than India's GDP.
Open market mein hai you already.
Can you switch off? Mr. Agarwal, can you mute yourself? Please keep yourself muted. My point is that every business is social business, but we are looking at social business, those which are not driven by market logic as much, but driven by cause first. So the question is, what drives a business that makes it social or market driven? And in India, every problem that I look at, when I look at, I come from a village where still the nearest road is even today about 3 kilometers from the village. Nearest, I mean, I'm talking about paved road. A dirt road, of course, is there anyway. Bullock carts can go and so on and so forth. But the paved road is still 3 kilometers away. The first bus station is 3 kilometers away. Now, that village, what does it need? Is everyone educated? First thing is we need social businesses addressing the mother-child care needs. Second, we need those who get into education. Third, we need healthcare. And beyond that is something which probably can't be handled by social space as such. So I would say that, yes, there is a trick to it. Trick is very simple. Identify a challenge. Think in terms of what is the simplest way to solve it, and look at who else has tried to solve it. What are the best solutions created, and what are the challenges they faced? And now you find a solution which you think is the best. Go to people and test it out. Do they find it easy? Is it cost effective? Now, if it really works, now think in terms of, can I really live on this solution if I created my village or my environment? Can it support the livelihood of the person who does it? So I think it's very, very important that any social entrepreneur, when they start costing it, they don't take their own cost. So don't cost a project on the margin. The cost of the project at the total cost. Otherwise, it will never become in reality viable. And this is one mistake I've seen 99% people make. That when they create a project, they do not take the cost of their own reproduction. They don't take their own day-to-day survival cost. We breathe, there is a cost to it. We drink water, there is a cost to it. We live, there is a cost to it. If I do not include that cost in something which I'm doing 24/7, then I can't make it work. So they should look at a realistic cost structure of whatever they are trying to do, number one. Now, if you can actually find a solution which can help you survive well, the level that you want your environment to support you, now you can consider, well, it's viable. Actually, it's sustainable in some ways, as long as you are there. But is it sustainable if you are not there? The second question, very simple question. Can be sustained if I'm not there? If it is sustained if I'm not there, now it's viable as well. In other words, it can have a life of its own. Now, if it's viable, can I actually replicate it with somebody else? If it can be done, now can I replicate it 2, 3, 4 times? Now test it out. If now it's possible, it's available now for readiness, it's ready to be scaled up. And that's the way you think in terms of starting a project. And that's how I'm taking you back to Drishti. I remember the day when he came to me in my house in Panchsheel Park in Delhi, and he said, "Sir, I'm going to close it down if you don't help me." I took 20 minutes and I wrote a check to make it survive. Then we got him $250,000. Then he went to $3 million and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know how far he went. But the fact is, he went beyond what he had imagined. Probably 500 villages, 1,000 villages, maybe 5,000, I don't quite know. But his potential was to solve a challenge of 600,000 villages. But that will take a Gandhi to get there. He may have solved 100, which is way bigger than most of us do. So, that's what happened. Similarly, in each one of them, in tarahat.com, my biggest challenge was not to create a solution. My biggest challenge was that everyone who wants to learn, they get too busy learning. A learner is busy learning, but a doer, an entrepreneur is different from a learner. So when a lot of people with amazing intellectual horsepower came together, now their goal was to figure it out, and they spent too much time figuring it out, not as much time getting it done. So my point is this, very simple. Start with a small problem which is real, which helps people who can't help themselves. Ensure that this problem works after taking into your own account your own expenses, your expense of survival and growth. If it can work at that level, now find another one where you can replicate it without yourself. And you find 2 or 3, if you can survive, now you're ready for the next stage. And there are 4 stages, very, very important. Sustainable, viable, replicable. Now you're looking at being scalable. If you don't go through these stages and think through, I think you will have more challenges. So yes, Dr. Oberoi, there's a trick to it. And the trick is thinking through, first as a leader who tries to solve problems for everyone. And second, at the microcosm, can I actually solve where I am? That's the first trick I'm looking at. And I'm much happier addressing questions about what are the other questions you have in mind. That would be much nicer. But having said that, I would say I look at Baramati conference, which we founded. I think there's a lot of noise. Can people switch off their microphones? A Galaxy tab A, I don't know who that is. Anyway, please switch off the. Otherwise, distracting. My point is, if I look at many experiments that we went through, those who succeeded, you could tell they will succeed because the way they approach the problem. And those who will create noise around it, they'll get awards. I'm generally not very excited about those who get a lot of awards. People who get awards, they get stuck with the glory of awards. They don't normally achieve what they could easily achieve if they focused on results rather than awards. So I'm not very much for the awards as such, and I realize in the beginning award sounds very good, but award is a barrier to success rather than a promoter of success in the social space particularly. In the commercial market space, I don't know, probably award helps, but social space doesn't for some reason. So I would say that when we founded Baramati Conference, which was 2001, even the name social entrepreneurship didn't exist. And I must credit Akhtar, who was from MIT, Samir from Harvard, and I went to Fletcher. We were all sitting there with figuring it out. What do we call this, what we're trying to do? And it took us about a few nights. Finally, 3, 4 o'clock one night, we said, let's call them social entrepreneurs. By the way, until 2001, that time, the word social was there, the word entrepreneur was there. They had not been combined together. They were not understood in the context. And we gave it a definition. We found the criteria whom to call social entrepreneurs and went ahead. You may have heard of an organization called Ashoka from the US. And it's a very interesting organization, and they call themselves now supporting social entrepreneurship. I look at them as supporting alternative lifestyle. People who do not want to belong to markets, don't want to belong to government structure, don't want to belong to established structure, but still want to contribute. They join that system, but few of them, and I'm sure there will be some who sustain themselves, who scale as well. But I'm still struggling to find great examples that came out of that, of these very bright people otherwise. They come through competition, they are amazing people, each one of them is an amazing person. But their ability to succeed as social entrepreneur, I always had some questions about that. And the reason was very simple. They chose an institutional support. If somebody supports you, you are not an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is someone who can, take a speck of dust and turn that into gold. That's an entrepreneur. Social entrepreneur is someone who, in the environment they live in, they can change the world before them and the world after them. They're two different worlds altogether. But they look at the social first, entrepreneurship alongside. In other words, they use enterprising skills to solve social issues. They don't want to make money. They want to achieve a goal of helping everyone around them. And then the question is, what is around us? Is my village around us, or my district around us, the state or nation or the world itself? The great leaders think of the whole humanity. National leaders think of their own challenges. Local leaders think of their own immediate challenges, so on and so forth. The question is, the leaders, those who run with social entrepreneurial projects, it's their vision, their dream, how far they see, how long they see, that decides what they're going to create. So Gandhi was someone who came to India from South Africa. We brought him here to make a difference. We brought him here to let the British, give us our own freedom and go away from our shores. And he found many, many ways, be it the salt movement, be it the charkha, be it whatever. And everything he touched became a national movement and achieved a scale and became viable in that context, because he was a great leader and he was looking at changing India, not just vis-a-vis structures of governance, but also vis-a-vis enabling people as such. So great leaders create great institutions, but each one of us can make a difference wherever we are, and we can create viable social projects and initiatives and businesses which can sustain us, which can sustain many others, which can begin to scale. Scale up is possible. And from here, I would hand over to David. David talks about scale in a different way. He talks about scale, in my opinion, is more like what government should talk about. But he has his own views, and I hand it over to him because I look at the clock. My time is up. But any questions you have, you can send it to me in the chat box, or ask Dr. Oberoi to take it up, and I'll be happy to address that. And we can carry on this conversation through a forum, offline, whichever way you like it. But let me summarize it again. Unless you begin to see the problem in the context of solving for everyone who needs it, the scale will be elusive, number one. When we find a solution, let's try to experiment with that. Can we sustain ourselves with the solution? If you can do that, there's some possibility. When we can do that, can we replicate it? Try it with people without you being in the center. If it works, now there's a greater possibility. Once you succeed with that, now you can think in terms of talking to David Wilcox or me, and I'll be very happy to take you to the next stage, because now we have proven that concept. And we can take you to the next stage of going from 1 to 5, now how to take you 5 to 50 to 500 and 5,000 villages or whatever. That's a much more complex challenge. But the first 2, 3 steps require clarity, a long-term vision, and leadership. If we have picked this up, any questions that we worth addressing? David.
Thank you, Satish, and thanks to Dr. Oberoi and colleagues and professors who have joined us today, and also who are spending so much time with the young entrepreneurs who are going to create the next great solutions. I'm going to talk very much, as Satish introduced the topic, about what happens after you reach scale up. And I'm going to do it in the form of referencing a famous Indian, C.K. Prahalad, who most of you would know if you know him from Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. But his first book, which was, I think, his most important one, Competing for the Future, introduced the idea with Gary Hamel of disruption. And one of the most important sentences in the book was, when any industry becomes monolithic in its operation, it's ripe for disruption. But then they said, to disrupt, you must unlearn. So I want to talk about what you have to unlearn in order to go to the next levels of scale. And I'm going to present 3 options to you. Assume you have to choose one of these as an outcome of your efforts. Create 1 million change makers, individuals working on their own, 1,000 social entrepreneurs, 100,000 social entrepreneurs who each have their own model, as Satish said, serving several districts. Or as a third option, create only 1,000, but 1,000 networks who are designed to scale the top 1% of the 100,000. So if you think about those three options, there's already organizations working on the first two. Ashoka, in fact, everyone a Changemaker is working directly on that large Changemaker number. We already have 100,000 social entrepreneurs because we have 20,000 who've gotten awards. Satish mentioned his view on awards. You know, there are mixed views, but we definitely have 100,000 social entrepreneurs if we have 20,000 who've gotten awards. So if those are the two important things to do, you should go do them. But this third option is different. This third option says we actually need something else in order to scale the very best. And that something else, until recently, didn't exist. Now, it's hard to argue that something that nobody's spent time on is the linchpin for scale. But now we see that it's beginning to exist. We see that these scaling networks are beginning to be built. There are some being built by very well-known organizations and some being built by less well-known networks. A couple of well-known examples are Co-Impact, which is led by the Skoll Foundation and Gates Foundation. And a second is Catalyst 2030, which is a group of entrepreneurs from several of the organizations that Satish mentioned, including Ashoka and the Schwab Foundation. So those are the well-known examples of new ways of scaling to get beyond a few districts, to take a proven solution where you have a model that works, but you have no idea how to actually get it to everyone. So on that front, we have to kind of unlearn a lot of the things that we believe about how you scale. If you want to reach everyone, a lot of people will say, well, I can do that. I can come up with the very best model in the world. And if I build the best model in the world, it will reach everyone. So you can actually test that. You can make a list. You can make a list of all of the people who've done that. I would suggest it's a list that's still in single figures. Now, there are less than 10 people on the planet who've done that. So that's our first thing to unlearn. Unlearn the idea that some kind of super model and hero entrepreneur are going to solve those kinds of problems. They're not. We have to organize to solve the problems where a lot of different leaders and players get involved. And that enables us to get from scaling up to at scale. Now, have you heard that phrase recently, at scale? Think about your normal experience of the pandemic. I would argue that two-word phrase has been said more in the last 6 months than in the last 60 years. At scale. What does it follow? It follows a request for more of a whole bunch of things. More testing, more personal protective equipment, vaccines at scale. And at scale is used because it means at the level that solves the problem. So the sheer number of problems we have and the very shortness of the list I mentioned shows us that the normal social entrepreneurial history and genre and sense doesn't actually get us to at scale. The first stage, the scaling up stage, does need to happen. But then we need to find the organizations that have reached that stage and create a whole new way to take them from there to at scale. Now that requires unlearning three things. First of all, you've got to unlearn the hero entrepreneur model. Now, some of you may think you are that person, and I am fine with that, and I would encourage you to demonstrate it, but be humble and recognize the list is less than 10. Second thing we have to unlearn is how you get to that next stage. And you can go to any impact investing conference or any other of the good conferences, and multiple people will say the following thing. I'll quote the head of the Global Steering Group on Impact Investment as my most recent example in Delhi in 2018. In his final presentation, he said, if we can just get better impact measurement, we will move trillions of dollars into scaling these impact models. And you can hear that at any one of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 conferences, and it is dead wrong. It hasn't happened, it won't happen, it won't ever happen. So we have to unlearn the idea that the model itself is what gets us at scale. The model gets us to the point where we can think about at scale. All of the questions about how to go from there to everyone are completely different than the questions to get scaled up. Now, we don't have time to talk about all those questions, but let me give you a really simple example that every single person on the planet is paying attention to right now. Let's assume I have 3 vaccines. One of them creates antibodies 80% of the time, one of them 70% of the time, and one of them 60% of the time. Those are the models. The models deliver those results. At the point in time that I know that information, how much do I know about which of those vaccines is most scalable? How much do I actually know about which vaccine I should take to scale? The answer is, I know nothing. I have no idea which of those vaccines should go to scale. And any business person could ask some of Satish's questions, and any government person could ask some of the government questions. And to get to everyone, you generally need both. But those are much more important questions than what the vaccine effectiveness is if you want to figure out which of those vaccines to take to scale. Obviously, the moment I tell you how much they cost to manufacture, the ranking will change. And many more questions after that. So you have to unlearn the idea that the model is the dominant way that you get to scale. It is not. You can build thousands of car chassis and car bodies. They can have comfortable seats and roll down windows and lights that shine brightly. They are useless until you put an engine inside. And the model is not a scaling engine. It's just the model. To create the scaling engine, you need to bring together all of the relevant players that you figure out from answering those other questions. Now let's talk about a few of the less well-known examples. A couple of them are from India. I'm very curious to see if the people listening are familiar with them. One of them graduates each year, not in total, each year, 3 to 4 million children with a high quality education delivered to them by 150,000 teachers across 15,000 schools in urban and peri-urban environments. And when USAID went out to the world and said, everybody who's reached more than 1 million people, send us your model. The model that had reached the most people was Vijay Bharati in India. This organization, with those 15,000 schools, having graduated roughly 64 million kids over the life of the organization. Nobody had reached more. So that's an example where the way they got to scale was completely different than you would normally think of. It was the social entrepreneur model, massive cost effectiveness, pricing that people $5 a day could afford, combined with a set of scaling models. Their counterpart in the rural villages is Ecole Vidalia. How many schools do they run? 100,000 plus. What's the budget for running 100,000 schools? $39 million. If you do that calculation, you will be stunned. They can do that and get the funding to do that because they are so cost effective. And that's what's enabled them to get to 100,000 schools, along with answering the other scaling questions that had nothing to do with the model itself. It had to do with how you scale. Final example, in Africa, every country is trying to control HIV/AIDS. The US government has spent billions of dollars trying to make this happen. They've funneled the money through lots of well-known NGOs. 2 years ago, they started shifting all of the money to local NGOs, and one of the largest recipients is a 34 NGO consortium across 34 countries in Africa. They also work in India. They also work in Latin America. And it's their model that is for probably a half dozen countries in Southern Africa controlling the spread of the epidemic. Again, at scale, at the level that solves the problem, controlling the spread for the entire country of Namibia, for the entire country of Mozambique. This is the scale that gets you to at scale. And the sooner you can learn about it as a young entrepreneur, the sooner you can build it into your thinking as you're focused on the scaling up part of the journey. But then, having thought about it and planned for it, you can go from scaling up to at scale, which will always require other partners, other players, other innovations that are not directly related to the model. So with that, I think I can stop and say, there you have some examples. You have some great Indian examples. You have some of the famous people working on these scaling networks. As you decide how to spend your personal time, you can try to be the hero entrepreneur. You can try to put together an amazing team of young people who have all the skills necessary to scale up and hope to be one of the successful ones. Or you can think about this new set of capabilities and how you could play a role in that. I'm suggesting to you that that third option, which is a relatively new option, relatively unknown, is for many people the option that will have the most impact on themselves and on the rest of the world. Thank you.
Dr. Obra, you have 10 minutes for question answer.
Yeah, I want to unmute myself. So I can see two questions that have come in the chat box. One is by Harshita. If you're there, Harshita, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sir. And I just wanted to ask, sir, sir, if an entrepreneur is failed to get funding from any investor, then we have to move with that idea, or we are strongly feeling with that idea, but do we need to move with that idea? Are there any cases in which we can move with that idea without getting the funding? Means, will that idea be surviving? Will that be a surviving idea?
See, the funding happens when there is a return on that. If you're talking about funding as a donation, that's a very different story. But if you're going to depend on donations, it won't be an enterprise. It will be primarily some social work you are doing. Let's not call this social entrepreneurship or social enterprise. But you have to get ready for raising that fund. Someone has to believe in you that it's possible and viable. To get to that point, you have to first prove somewhere. And that proof has to be given and created by the entrepreneur themselves. It can't be created by somebody else. Secondly, if you're convinced about an idea, to get someone to believe in your idea and fund it is also part of the skill which you have to develop. So it's not something that comes easy to anyone. It's a skill that's acquired, understood. Someone can help you. Look for those who know how to do that, those who can translate your challenges, your aspirations to those who are willing to support causes like what you're trying to address. So issue is this, that at every point there is a bridge required, a translator required, someone who will help you get to the next stage, and you have to recognize that, right? But if you posit your question the way you did, you have to take a step back and ask yourself, why would somebody fund you? Is it donation? Then it's another matter. But if it's investment, it has to be returned. And a social business, social enterprises, they're not designed around creating a return for the investors. So why will someone give it to you? So then you go to the foundations who actually support such causes, except one caveat. I have found anyone who depends on foundations, they don't really become social enterprises. They become dependent on them. They don't create viable models. They just survive on grants after grants, which has no life of its own. It's like living a life on crutches. So those who seek funding from any institution, they live a life on crutches. They don't develop enough strength on their legs to walk. So just think about those issues, and probably you'll find an answer. But these are serious questions that you're asking. Thank you.
I'll just mention a couple of things. We often find ourselves thinking that because we're trying to do something good in the world, that the world should support us. That's backwards. What you want to ask is, have I got a solution that deserves to scale? When we looked at 3,000 enterprises, what we found was that the 300 that deserved to scale had three simple characteristics. They were almost always working on multiple problems. So they were more scalable because they could solve multiple problems. And the people with the multiple problems, this is the second point, liked the solution. They thought it was better than what they have. That was in Dr. Oberoy's list. But when you can do that with multiple problems, it's more scalable. And then thirdly, because they were solving multiple problems, there were multiple places they could go for funding. And that was true in 90% of the cases that had scaled, had those three characteristics. So in deciding if you have something that deserves to scale, you can use those simple three characteristics to answer that question.
Thank you, David and Satish. We have a few more questions now to take. I think there's one question by Mr. Chaturvedi. If you can go ahead and ask the question, please.
Well, I have already written my question. My name is Dr. Chaturvedi.
Yeah.
This is about spin-off companies based on scientific research from academic institutions of higher learning or research organizations. What is their business model, and how do you propose to scale them up?
Well, anything that comes from R&D, it generally is looking for different kind of models. And I don't think they belong to the social business unless, of course, you're looking at distribution, for instance, in the case of polio vaccine. The distribution could be a social cause, but it was not designed as social entrepreneurial venture, right? Because there is no income coming from there. There is no sustainability there. It's a program created by institutions with funding, either the government or large foundations who have taken upon themselves to solve a problem. That's basically a government or statist approach to handling it. That's not entrepreneurship. Most things which are born out of laboratories, they require a very high level of capital investment in any of the solutions they have. They can become decent businesses. So I would separate them from being social business. But in case they want to become social business, some of them will qualify for that area. And we have to be careful to identify where does it belong? Does it belong to the market, belong to state, belong to foundations, or the social business? And if they belong there, they must meet those 3-4 criteria I talked about. If they pass through that test, now they are rugged enough, robust enough to go to the next stage.
I would just say that with universities, you've got to look very carefully at the university's policies with respect to spinning out businesses. And the policies will vary widely. In my local area here in Boston, there's one university that applies a 70% overhead charge to everything that they spin out. And that kills everything except the most innovative opportunities. So they're not really working in the social space. They're operating like a venture capitalist and trying to get a big hit now and then. So those policies will have a big impact on whether or not there are successful spin-outs of the more social kinds of businesses.
We take the next question. Srishti Arora, if you are there, you can ask your question quickly.
Hello, good evening, sir. Thank you so much for your words, sir. So I just wanted to ask, like as we know, that's the pandemic which is going on, and in this scenario, it becomes very difficult for youth like us who want to establish their career in social entrepreneurship, where we have to start from the scratch. So, is there any perfect strategy according to you which will help us in establishing a career or in this ongoing situation, and which will provide with some a base where we can start easily in such a scenario? Thank you, sir.
So every social enterprise that is in the world has attempted to do something to support the pandemic. You can look at the lists of all of what they've done. Go to Catalyst 2030 and look at the list of all the things those social entrepreneurs have done to support the pandemic. I would recommend you look at going to work with one of them initially, who've already figured out a solution that could be supported, or align your social enterprise with a solution that they're already delivering. Get their solution to scale in a place where you can operate. Those are two different strategies than starting initially with your own business from scratch.
So we can take two more questions quickly. One is from Poonam. If you go ahead, Poonam, quickly.
Yeah, this is Poonam here, and I represent a company called Skipper Seal. We are into business in India and Africa, specifically Nigeria. So we tried a couple of things, doing things like train the trainer programs and taking educational institutions from here under our CSR programs. But the major issue I feel is the people, young people to drive. Like a lady is asking for, she needs funding and we need people to work. Is there any platform where we people can meet those who want to really fund such enterprises and go into social enterprise large scale, and those who really need to want to work on it? So is there some platform where we can get connected? I think there's a lot of gap, because I hear many of them asking for funds, and here there are few who have funds.
David.
Well, if it's a potentially for-profit opportunity, as Satish has said several times, then you have to follow through the normal kind of investing channels, while at the same time seeking investors who would be called impact investors, who want to do both. There's the Global Impact Investment Network, which has the members across the world. The Global Steering Group on Impact Investment is a second group that has listed members. The GSG has country-specific groups, so there's a GSG committee for India. Each of those would have the most likely investors for a for-profit opportunity if you can match it to the sectors that they want to invest in. For a nonprofit, you're back to what Satish said. Most nonprofit solutions that scale are actually scaling networks, and they are funded because of their network characteristics, not because of their model itself. ECHL is an example. Vijay Bharati is an example. Humana People to People is an example. These are networks that have demonstrated scale, and in order to see that scale continue, donors and investors are willing to fund them as continuation of what they've already proven, not on the model side, but on the scale side.
And I would say that if you achieve a certain a size or a level of maturity, then what David does, he can help those organizations go to the next stage. But there's always a level at which you're free. It's almost like if you want to go for admission to MA, you have to at least have done BA. If you want to go to BA, at least in high school, and so on and so forth. So you have to achieve the kind of, you can say, skill or experience that you can go to the next stage. That's what's important. More than that, I would say that anyone who depends on any foundation funding is not a social enterprise. They are serving a cause, social cause, yes, but they are not an enterprise. They're not business as such. And business requires you to be, socially driven business requires you to be thinking outside the grant model. And if you can raise venture funds, then you are ready for the market. In this space, first thing is to figure out, can you find a solution? Thinking in terms of a long-term perspective of trying to meet everyone's needs, which is sustainable to begin with in your own context. If it's possible, is it replicable or not? And I can't overemphasize, because people think there is money to be picked up from somewhere which will make a business become social business. That doesn't work like that. What's important is you have to find a solution that's sustainable, that can be actually vetted to go to the next stage, which can be replicated, and then it's available for scalability. So that's the path you take, and you will be looking at a different level of success. But if you start by expecting to be funded by someone, then you're first taking the wrong road to begin with.
I think I've been taken incorrectly. I have funds and I'm looking for projects.
Oh, okay.
Okay, then connect me.
You're in a happy state. You're a very happy state.
Yeah. We, as per corporate, we have CSR funds. We give it to NGOs. So,
Okay, I can tell you, I have plenty of things which can help you become social entrepreneur.
yes.
Again, the model is same, and I'll be very happy to talk to you about that. And Dr. Oberoi can give you the contact points, and we can take it from there.
Dr. Oberoi, can I ask one question?
Yes, sure, please.
Yeah, so I'm Prema. I'm based in Mumbai, and I have 25 years of educational career. In last 6 months, decade, I have fortunately I left my last assignment as a chief operating officer. I was working with the international school. Currently, I am doing sessions online. Now, this 6-month pandemic, what I have achieved, I have not achieved in my last 25 years. I've trained more than 1,500 teachers, and currently I have started online school in 3 states, 4 online. And what I'm doing is I am basically going to train these kids, those who are in rural sector, and I'm making things possible which is impossible. I'm connecting people from all over world and taking them to the rural sector. I have able to do everything on free of cost, but today I'm stuck because I need fund, and that's a challenge. And everybody whomsoever I'm talking, and it is not a model which I have made for these 4 states. I'm building a model which is based on national education policy, which might as well work for 700 districts in India. I didn't need anyone to do all that. Nobody trained me. What is social entrepreneurship? I don't know ABC, but I could relate to Mr. Satish, Mr. David, every point they could say. Am I a social entrepreneur? I don't know. I am a passionate educator, which I've realized in the last 6 months. This mind shift which has happened in 6 months' time, that now you can connect with technology, has given me huge boost. And I took this, this as an opportunity. I am stuck at a point where I need crazy people like me who can, join. I'm looking for people who can join and make this happen. What kind of support I can get? That's precisely my question is, Mr. Satish.
Well, that's a tough one, Rimaji. But I would say that because if you're crazy, you've made a good start, first thing. Second, I think this is a longer conversation, and it's not something, there is no pill for this. So I would say, Dr. Oberoi can connect us, and you can write to me on the email, and we can talk on the phone once once you have sent me your basic framework, the way where we operate, and we can talk about that, because these things are not innocent tablet, right? So you got to think about it. Let's understand them, and we'll address that. But I think you're doing great. The first
Nobody better on the planet.
Thank you, Mr. Satish. I have, in fact, I looked for you. I sent you Facebook request, LinkedIn, everywhere I could trace you. And today when I got this, I said, yes, today I'm going to hear you. And so, I'm hunting for all good people. So I know I may be sounding crazy, but I'm honest. And I know what I'm doing and where I want to go.
Nobody better to talk to on the planet on that topic than Satish.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Satish, can we take one last question? Because there's one student who wrote the question quite early. So Yatika, if you're there, we can have the last question for the evening.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
So my question is, what will be the major constraints, incidents over social enterprises life cycle post COVID-19? Thank you.
David.
Yeah, I would encourage you to take a look at the Catalyst 2030 report, which has a list of 30 different organizations who have shifted their strategy away from what they were doing, modestly in some cases, significantly in other cases. And there's about 15 pages of that 90-page report that says what they are doing. And that will give you an example of the things that they're doing. In India, there is I believe it's a LinkedIn group on COVID-19. If you'll send me a LinkedIn invite, I'll refer you to the group, David L. Wilcox on LinkedIn. And they are an Indian-focused group on COVID-19, which has members that are lots of different members working on the pandemic. And you can just join that group and go in and look at who they are and see if anything aligns with what you're doing, what you're interested in, what your potential opportunities are.
Thank you so much, sir.
We have come to the end because we are 10 minutes past 6, as I can see. So I will give a very brief thank to Satish Jha and to Mr. David Wilcox for this very exciting, engaging conversation. I think we would have continued for a little longer, but then we are sticking to the time of 1 hour. And also I feel that there is a lot of buzz around the concept of social value creation, shared value creation, social enterprise. And many young students actually come to me who are interested in entering this field. And I think pandemic has also called in for this paradigm shift where people are more empathetic to concerns of the society. So I see this shift happening, evolving. It's not a sudden shift which is going to happen, but I do see positive indicators, if I can use this word, to sort of business shifting and carrying along with them the social causes also. It was an exciting, engaging, enlightening conversation which we had today evening. And thanks Satish and David for sparing time. And I'm hoping that the students of Delhi University really enjoyed the conversation and all those people who joined us from different forums in different areas. So thank you everybody for being with us today evening.
Thank you, Dr. Oberoi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.